so glad to see you. Welcome to the Transplant Families Virtual 2025 Pediatric Transplant Conference. It is absolutely wonderful to see so many of you today. As president of Transplant Families, it is truly my greatest honor to welcome you virtually and kick off what promises to be an inspiring and empowering day together. This past year has been absolutely phenomenal for transplant families. We focused on connection, education, and amplifying your voices online and offline. For instance, we've created over 20 hours of vital educational content, easily accessible online, and already reaching thousands of views, ensuring families have access to crucial information right when they need it. We have our virtual Caregiver Connect program, fostering the essential peer-to-peer bonds that mean so much on this journey, proving that distance is no barrier to meaningful support. We coordinated a distribution of 600 totes for hope for new families, bringing comfort and practical support directly to them with our partnerships with over 60 different hospitals nationwide. But our work extends beyond the direct support we provide patients and families. Your voices, represented by transplant families, are actively shaping the future of transplant care from coast to coast. We have been honored to serve on critical national policy committees, ensuring the unique needs of pediatric transplant families are heard loud and clear in virtual meetings and national discussions. We've also deepened our commitment to advancing research, embedding the essential patient and family perspective within leading learning health networks and hospital consortia, often collaborating with virtual platforms. Furthermore, we're closely working with industry partners, weaving your crucial patient voice into the development of latest technologies and therapies designed for our small but mighty population. Every resource shared online, every virtual connection fostered, every policy meeting attended, every research collaboration, it's all driven by our unwavering commitment to serving the many thousands of patients and families in our vibrant online community. We continue to amplify caregivers' concerns about childhood transition to adult care, monitoring current viral health outbreaks, questioning long wait lists, and the questions that concern you most. We are truly grateful for this amazing community. You are why we do what we do. It's especially meaningful that we connect virtually during this month. April, as many of you know, is Donate Life Month. Even though we're online, the importance of raising awareness about organ, eye, and tissue donation resonates powerfully. We honor the selfless heroes, the donors and their families, whose gift makes the miracle of transplant possible. And perfectly timed within this important month of April, we also celebrate National Pediatric Transplant Week. Each year, we place our conference on the final day of this important week. This week shines a spotlight specifically on our children. Together, we are celebrating their incredible journeys, recognizing the dedication of their medical teams and honoring the donor heroes who gave them a second chance at life. Let's take a moment wherever we are to truly reflect on this profound gift of life and the hope it represents. An event like this, especially in a virtual format for a single jam-packed day, requires immense effort and support. First, I want to give a huge thank you to our generous sponsors who make today possible. Natera, CareDx, Stanford Children's Health, and the Children's Organ Transplant Association, and Enduring Hurts. Your belief in our mission and your financial commitment provide the essential resources that allow us to bring this platform together, deliver quality content, and support one another virtually. Please join me in showing your appreciation. Perhaps drop a thank you in the chat for our sponsors. And please take a moment to visit their virtual booths. Learn more about their work and thank them personally. Behind the scenes, a phenomenal group of dedicated individuals has worked countless hours to bring this virtual conference to life. To our conference planning committee, thank you for your vision, your technical savvy, your meticulous planning, and your passion. You've created an exceptional online experience for us today. We are also incredibly fortunate to have a lineup of distinguished speakers joining us remotely throughout the day. These experts, clinicians, researchers, and fellow caregivers are generously sharing their knowledge, insights, and experiences with us through this virtual platform. Thank you for dedicating your time and experience to enrich our community online. And finally, thank you to each and every one of our attendees. Thank you for logging in, for prioritizing this day, and for bringing your energy to this virtual space. Whether you're a parent, a caregiver, a patient, a medical professional, or a supporter, you are the heart of transplant families. Your presence online, your engagement, and your willingness to connect, share, and make this conference meaningful. Thank you for being here. Now, as we dive into our program, we have a very special lineup focused on our young adult recipients. We know you're very excited for this. It's kind of a peering into our future for many of us parent caregivers. To lead us into this vital discussion entitled PARTNER Ad3vance Project, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce someone whose work is dedicated to improving the psychosocial outcomes for transplant families. Please join me in giving a warm virtual welcome to Dr. Melissa Cousino, who will introduce our esteemed speakers for this roundtable. Melissa, thank you for guiding us today. It's such an important conversation. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Melissa, and to Transplant Families for hosting another wonderful conference for patients and families. I am a pediatric transplant psychologist at the University of Michigan, where I work primarily with our pediatric heart and pediatric kidney transplant patients. I've been working with this group of young people for over 10 years now, both as a clinician, but also as a researcher, advocate, and leader in a number of transplant societies. So I'm really thrilled to be here. And there's truly, as a psychologist, nothing I love more than learning from the young people that we work with, and that we are so motivated to care for and do better for. So with that, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing to you truly our experts for the day, the panelists who are going to introduce themselves. So first, wanting to let Maddie introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Maddie Flickinger. I'm a 22-year-old liver transplant recipient and a member of TAP.
Thanks, Maddie. And Andrew? Nope. Andrew, you're muted still.
Sorry about that. My name's Andrew Hartless. I am 22 years old, and I also got a liver transplant 5 years ago.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And Emma?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Emma. I am a heart transplant recipient of 14 years, and I'm also a member of TAP.
And Selah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Selah. I'm a liver transplant recipient of 10 years, and I am 24 as of Monday.
Happy birthday, Selah. Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to hear more from you. But before doing so, we're going to introduce Dr. Emily Perito, who is going to tell you more about TAP and the work that this group and transplant families and a number of networks have been collaborating on.
Everybody, thanks for having me. I'm Emily Perito. I'm a pediatric liver doc at UCSF in San Francisco. And I have the distinct pleasure of working with the folks you've just met in a group called Transplant Advocate Partners. I'm going to take just a few minutes to give you some background on the project and then really try to hand it over to Andrew, Maddie, Selah, and Emma so they can tell you about the project in their own voices. So this project was started with as a what we call PCORI engagement award. The project is called PARTNER Ad3vance, which stands for Patient-Centered Research in Pediatric Transplant, engaging families and recipients with a focus on adolescent and young adult advisors. And you can see here the networks and groups that are involved. A super important one for us has been Transplant Families, and we've been really excited to partner with Melissa and Joseph and Jen Lau and other folks on that, as well as the Starzl network, which is our learning health network for liver transplant, Action, which is the learning health network focused on heart failure and heart transplant, and IROC, which is another learning health network focused on kidney disease and kidney transplant. So this work actually started in 2021 with sort of the first generation version of this project that we called PARTNER, Patient-Centered Research in Transplant, Engaging Families and Recipients. And you can see here the leadership team. And this was a project that really focused on the liver transplant, the pediatric liver transplant community as a joint effort of the Starzl Network and Transplant Families. And what we were interested in thinking more about was how we could work together as a group of pediatric transplant providers and families, ideally with parents, caregivers, and recipients, to think about patient-centered outcomes research, as well as other topics like education and advocacy. But I'll tell you a little bit about what patient-centered outcomes research is, because that kind of gave us some focus for the initial partner project. So patient-centered outcomes research aims to ask and answer questions that really matter to patients and caregivers. Questions like, given my own personal characteristics, conditions, and preferences, what should I expect will happen to me? What can I do to improve the outcomes that are most important to me? What are my options and what are the potential benefits and harms of those options? And how can clinicians or the care delivery systems help us make the best decision about my child's health and healthcare? So these may be questions that you found you've asked in the course of your own care. And the idea with patient-centered outcomes research is to really take those, again, as a collaboration between the people receiving the care and the people providing the care into a systematic study where we can try to answer these questions in a meaningful way. For our first generation project from 2021 to 2023 called Partner, we worked in, again, as I said, in the pediatric liver transplant community. We used some research fundamentals curriculum from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and surveys about life on the transplant journey and research ideas and priorities. And we had a series of learning and feedback modules that many of you guys may have participated in. You can see the kind of questions we focused on here. We did focus groups and some self-guided learning through an app on the phone, and we're able to include 219 parents and caregivers, 21 recipients, and 133 transplant providers from across the US and Canada, from 16 different liver transplant centers. We also worked with an advisory board that included parents, caregivers, and transplant providers. And we came up with what we call a partner roadmap for doing patient-centered outcomes research in the Starzl network. If you're interested, you can access it here. And we were really excited about this as a way to really bring together the family opinions on what patient-centered outcomes research should look like, what kind of questions to ask, how to involve kids and parents comfortably in this kind of work, and what kind of outcomes would be meaningful to them. And we're hoping to use that in research in the liver transplant network going forward. However, a really important thing that we recognized in Partner is that the actual patient voices, the pediatric liver transplant recipients, were underrepresented. We know there's an opportunity where pediatric providers and parents directly engage with adolescent and young adult transplant recipients in your daily life and in clinical care. And many of us have enrolled adolescents and young adults in traditional research trials. But we were also recognized a challenge that we haven't really previously partnered with adolescents and young adults in patient-centered research or priority setting specifically for what their research priorities are. In addition, we recognize that adolescents and young adults may not have experience designing or doing research or with engaging really as partners in research teams, not just as a people who agree to enroll, but as people who really are involved from the beginning in designing the question, thinking about how to involve people, and deciding then how we share the results afterwards. And transplant providers, on the other side, are not really experienced in engaging with adolescent and young adult partners in all steps of the research process like that. So we recognize that we really need an infrastructure to support co-creation and co-conduct of patient-centered outcomes research with adolescent and young adult transplant recipients. And we're really interested in how we could partner with the learning health networks to provide some of this infrastructure. That's how we came to PARTNER Ad3vance. This is a 2-year project that we're currently 1 year into, and it's funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute as a capacity building engagement award, which means that it's funding for 2 years to really help set up the infrastructure to do this. And our goal was to establish what we originally called Transplant Youth Partners, but has now been renamed by the group Transplant Advocate Partners, as a group of young adult and adolescent transplant recipients that were interested in partnering with our networks on patient-centered outcomes research, as well as, I think from the sort of funding perspective, this was how we started with this idea about patient-centered outcomes research, and we are hoping to work on that. But we really would like to see this group as a broader effort to think about engaging young adult and adolescent transplant recipients in whatever it is they are interested in the transplant community. And I think we'll hear from our TAP members about what that may be. And really to try to make sure that in this work we're doing, whether it's research, advocacy, education, or other programs, that we're really addressing their priorities and their needs. This is the Partner Advance leadership team. We've been really fortunate to work with a group of parents, transplant recipients, and docs on setting this up across the 4 organizations. And in these 2 years, we're working on establishing Transplant Advocate Partners as an educated and empowered group of adolescents and young adults who are transplanted as children. For the future, what we're really hoping to sort of help continue to support is a sustainable adolescent and young adult engagement and expertise, and supportive infrastructure for adolescent and young adult involvement, both in PCORI and, as I said, in other network projects, maybe that come from the networks, but ideally that also come from the TAP group, so they can tell us what's important to work on, and then we can partner in working on it together. So these are the goals of the 2-year sort of initiating part of the project: to establish a sustainable, diverse transplant advocate partners group, to co-create training and priorities for transplant advocate partners with transplant recipient members, and then to create infrastructure for sustainable adolescent and young adult partnerships in our networks. And I think that's a really important part of it also, in that, I mentioned that transplant providers or our teams may not necessarily be used to partnering with young adults and adolescents in this way. And so to really make sure that we're training the other side and telling them, giving them some tips from the TAP members about how to successfully work together. And here's the kind of framework that we've been thinking of. The goal is to establish this group, to expand and evolve, to really listen to the TAP members in this first group, and as we expand, to hear about what they want this group to be and what would be useful and interesting to them. And then really empower them to take on leadership as we move on, so that we can be supportive infrastructure, but that it's really up to the transplant recipients to guide us in terms of what we can do to help them. If you're interested in learning more, there's some additional information here. We started with an initial cohort that you will meet part of today, and we're currently expanding the group. And so you can find more using this QR code if you are interested. I'm going to stop sharing now and invite everybody to turn on their cameras. We're going to transition now into hopefully learning more about TAP from the members themselves. Thank you guys again for being here today. I think maybe we'll start by just asking you guys to talk a little bit about what made you interested in joining this group. What did you think was missing? What could it do for you? And what are you hoping to get out of it? Selah, would you be willing to start?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
So for me, I think the main thing that made me really interested in the project was just the idea of being surrounded by a bunch of other transplant recipients. I know a lot of us, it's not super common. So unless you are actively seeking out like camps or like certain support groups, I feel like meeting another transplant recipient is not something that you come across very often. So having that perspective and just meeting all these different people who had a very similar experience was very interesting to me. And then also the idea of having just like seeing where everybody was at in life. So like we have people who are like in law school, we have people who are like in the arts, people who are in med school. So I think it was very cool and inspiring to see that for me. And that was kind of a big driver in joining the group for me.
Others should feel free to jump in and share as well if you are willing.
I'll add on to that. Like Selah said, it's kind of a rare situation to be our age and also have a transplant. And so that was a big driver for me as well. But I had also started to get involved with other advocacy organizations. And that's actually how I found out about TAP. I had a leadership member approach me about the opportunity, and I had learned that in the transplant community, adolescent and young adult voice was something that people were really trying to promote, and there wasn't a lot of it. And I felt that TAP's mission really highlighted the adolescent and young adult recipient voice, and I definitely wanted to be a part of promoting that in the broader transplant community.
Thanks. Emma?
Um, I'm kind of going to echo what everyone else said, and I think also bring it back to like what Emily and Melissa mentioned is that the idea of patient-centered outcomes and being able to bring questions that kind of focus on my agency and my experience has provided an opportunity for me to kind of reconnect with my transplant in the last 14 years that I've never really had before. It's not really centered on how I'm feeling or my, biological markers that like my transplant is doing well. And it's just a really unique opportunity to be in community that's also led by members in the community. And so this kind of idea has led me to pursue a career in mental health. So I'm hoping that I can kind of take what I'm learning with TAP and then start my career in clinical social work.
I bet Melissa and probably others on this call would love to talk more with you about that also. Andrew?
For me, it was getting a chance to participate and give back to this community. Unlike many TAP members, my career is in engineering and IT. I've never been a part of this community or interacted with it before. So this is a new opportunity for me to give back and participate in a way that I've never really thought about before. As Emma pointed out before, a transplant was just something that happened to me. But this group's helped me reframe it as something special and important to me.
And I'd imagine, Andrew, that as you've been participating in TAP, you're even seeing ways where an engineer and IT specialist can aid in how we think about this. My apologies. All of a sudden, my camera is not turning on, but we learn to be resilient and flexible in the field of transplantation. So thank you all for sharing, and I'll move on to our next question is just, how you've all started to talk a little bit about how this experience in TAP has started to motivate and direct next steps of thinking for you, whether in your career or in your interests in advocacy. And so we'd love to hear a little bit more about what your experience with TAP has been so far. Perhaps Emma, you can start us off.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's always nice to be in community. I think especially with everything that's going on within the current political environment, it's nice to show up at a meeting and know that you're not alone and kind of figuring out what's next with healthcare. And so knowing that I have a resource of at least like 20 people, including physicians, is really an incredible resource.
And Maddie, do you want to share more?
Sure, yeah. So being a part of TAP has been really inspiring. Like we talked about just a little bit earlier, there are so many of us going in different directions with our careers, and it's been exciting to see how advocacy and transplantation can really be taken in multiple different paths. Like Andrew said, he's going into engineering, and you wouldn't initially think that engineering and transplantation would cross over, but there are a lot of roads where it would. For me specifically, I'm a science major, I'm a biology major, so this has been great to see from a research perspective. But there are people going into law school, there are people who are interested in policy around transplantation, like Emma said, mental health. It's been a really great experience to see how many different ways adolescent and young adults can impact this broader community and really improve the transplantation process for everybody coming behind us and people currently in the process.
Thanks, Maddie. Andrew, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this question.
For me, before TAP, I never really spoke about my liver transplant with anyone except my doctors and my family. Having a group of like-minded individuals, it's been really nice to feel listened to. The team is very respectful. It's a very safe place to talk about the actual impacts of going through that at a younger age.
So the community has been really helpful, Andrew, which is awesome to hear. And Selah.
Yeah, kind of just piggybacking off of what everyone else is saying. I think it's been very special to kind of like, I think somebody said it early, so I'm going to use your words, but like reconnect with my transplant. It's always been like a pretty big part of my life, but I feel like recently with this group, I've thought about it in ways that I haven't thought about before. And then also in terms of like my day-to-day life, I'm in med school right now, so I'm constantly learning about like the physiology of stuff and like biology of stuff. So to then come into this group and talk about like more of the like emotional stuff or the other parts that are really important in research that I feel like a lot of people don't really consider. It's very like quantitative. So to be part of this group and kind of discuss all of the other aspects and realize, you know, some things are really important that some people are not considering, and other things maybe we don't think are as important. So I think it's just been so cool to get so many different perspectives.
I saw Emma give you some virtual snaps, which is super cool to just have these additional friends rooting you on in life, which is awesome.
Yeah. I wonder if you guys could sort of fill the audience in a little bit on what we do in TAP, what the actual meetings have looked like, and maybe if there's a moment that kind of sticks out to you, you could share that one. Selah, do you want to start us off this time?
Yeah. So for our meetings, we kind of have a different goal for each meeting. So sometimes, like Dr. Perito touched on, we started out with kind of establishing like research techniques, making sure that everybody was on the same page. And then we've transitioned to a little bit more of providing input to like groups that are coming to us. So if somebody wants to do research about pediatric transplant, they can pop into our group and all of a sudden they have like 20 different perspectives on pediatric transplant, which is not something you get in a lot of places. And if someone wants to create like a mentoring program to connect like transplant patients and people on the waiting list, then they can pop in and have 20 different perspectives, and people who are, had transplant the year they were born, people who had transplant last year. So I think it's really, really been cool to see that. I think one moment that stands out to me specifically was probably like the first group that we had that was that style, where someone popped in and was like, what do you guys think about my research? And I think that's when I saw everything really connecting about like, oh, we're making this is like a big deal, and we're making a really big difference here. So I think that was definitely a highlight for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of want to also just quickly jump in. I think the part that's really stuck out to me the most is that we're starting to do the recruitment for the next cohort, and being able to have so much input in that has really kind of kickstarted the patient being part of the process for the entire cohort and entire study. And I think it's really cool that they're modeling that in the research study, so that we truly can say that there are patient voices part of every single decision that was made, including what's happening for next year. And so that has really stuck out to me and been kind of really empowering.
I was going to say something very similar to Emma. As part of the team that has been helping to interview the next people joining, it's really great to be a part of the process in more ways than just decoration, to have my voice be listened to, and to get to connect from people that have had such a vast variety in experiences with this. I had my transplant right before I hit 18. I was put on the list a month before I hit 18. And so getting to talk to people that had it when they were infants is such a crazy divide that it's been really great to bring into this team. And to talk about what actual meetings look like, another aspect that we do is focusing on our days, focusing on our transplant journeys, getting to talk about, oh, this is happening with me, this is happening with me. Getting a chance to meet in the middle with all those different perspectives has been lovely.
To build on to that, it's been great to see how many people our age are interested in helping to promote a better transplant journey for everybody, like I said earlier, coming up behind us, but also who are currently going through it. The new cohort that's coming in, we have a lot of people who we're interviewing and we're talking to, and that's been super exciting to see. Like we've said, there are so many other of us who are already in TAF right now who are looking to make a difference, and then all the people coming to us right now looking for our experience, looking for our perspective, has been so inspiring to really see, and exciting that we can really make a difference, and that this group is something that's hopefully going to be around for a very long time.
Maddie, that sets us up so well for some of the questions that are coming in through the chats. And so just so many people who have commented already to thank you all for what you're doing and how amazing and how important these voices are. But both Brittany and Jen asked about kind of you know, with your perspectives as a member of TAP, but also, you know, as pediatric transplant recipients, what would you like to see happen, you know, for the future of TAP, or perhaps what advocacy issues are you especially excited about TAP really guiding and leading the way with?
I'll go ahead and start us off here if that's all right. A great aspect of TAP is that all of us, as we've talked about, come from different perspectives and want different things. There's a lot of us that do want to focus on research or advocacy or education. For me, the direction I would like to see TAP go, and I think at least have influence of, is I think education is really important. When I was going through my liver issues, my mother had a friend of mine named Steve who had a liver transplant, and just talking to him, getting to hear his perspective that things would be all right, made a massive difference in my mother's state of health. And so I think education, letting people know, letting families know that are going through this, that it does get better, that there are options, that it's a long process with ups and downs. I think just aspects of that will make a huge difference, and that's where I'd like to see TAP go in the future.
Kind of piggybacking off of that, I think one of the things that's so special about TAP is that we are not super strict about what we want to focus on, that everybody has kind of like their different niches and is able to explore them appropriately. So I think the future of TAP for me is like a tree that's branched off into like so many different like avenues. So like the education piece, the mentoring piece, the research piece, the advocacy. There's certain people that are interested in like very specific portions of research. Like I'm very interested in like transitional care, like pediatric to adult care. So I feel like everybody has such a unique perspective that I think TAP is going to be a very it's going to have a very wide like breadth of, I think, what people will come to TAP for, because we have such like diversity in our group that pretty much any issue related to pediatric transplant, like somebody is going to want to be involved. Somebody will have an opinion, somebody will have input. So I think that's kind of where I see it going, is just every single avenue related to pediatric transplant. We'll all kind of have our little niches, but then still be like very strongly connected within each other.
That's really awesome. Maddie or Emma?
Yeah, just building off of what Andrew and Selah already said, we want to be known as like the hub of adolescent and young adult voice. We want to have people come to us. We want to be able to share all of our different perspectives and experiences, and to be able to branch off and be really flexible on what we can cover. So we're hopefully covering a lot of different topics, but that's where I hopefully TAP will go, and I think that's where everybody is hoping TAP will go. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with more with what everybody else said.
Well, we're really excited to see where you guys take it. And I would encourage the audience, TAP is open for discussion and for business. So if you have ideas about what you might like TAP input on, or opportunities to potentially partner with folks, you could definitely, you probably know how to find Melissa McQueen, but also feel free to reach out to me, or Jen Lau or Joseph Hillenberg, through Transplant Families. And we, currently are sort of running the sessions, or transitioning into running the sessions that are 90 minutes long on Zoom, because we got people from all over the country. Folks have been really nice about fitting into their schedule times that work in all the different time zones. Part of the session is spent on some training in patient-centered outcomes research, or in advocacy, or in communication. And the other part of the sessions, we're hoping to focus on different projects that organizations are working on, that or that folks might be interested in collaborating with. And the idea of TAP is sort of a hub for, like, bring your project, see who might be interested in, and potentially connect out to other organizations, is something that we're really excited to provide opportunities to do. I wonder if we could transition a little bit to some of the other questions in the chat. Um, you have, I think, in the audience a lot of parents and caregivers, and so they're really interested in thinking about, as Selah mentioned, that transition from being a pediatric transplant recipient to being a young adult and what your life looks like and what your care looks like. Can you talk a little bit about that challenge and how you've met it, or what you wish was there? You know, what should TAP do to improve that experience? Selah, since you mentioned that transition to care, do you mind if I ask you to start?
Yeah, for sure. So I transitioned 2.5 years ago. To be so honest, it was a little bit stressful. I feel like the pediatric world, at least my experience, is very like hold your hand. If you have any questions, like we're here to answer. It was like very, very resourceful, which I loved, but I do feel like transitioning to adult, it is a little bit more hands-off. And they kind of expect you at that point to kind of know all of the things that you should. And questions I feel like are sometimes just redirected to other people. So that was definitely a stressor for me because I felt like it was a very like stark shift. I did have a unique experience because I was switching from pediatric to adult and also switching centers at the same exact time. So that also probably compounded that. I think one of the things that helped was just leaning on people around me, and like even this group has helped me a lot in that. And like sometimes when I am having a bad day and I feel like, you know, something is missing, I have other people to ask questions to. I have like my support circle to lean on. So that kind of filled that gap for me. But I do think that there is definitely work to be done in kind of making that transition a little bit less stark. Yeah, don't have the answer right now, but working on it.
Thanks. Maddie, any thoughts?
Yeah, my transition was a little bit different. I came from a primarily adult center that just had a pediatric program, so I wasn't at a children's hospital. So my transition, I think, was probably a little bit easier. Things had already kind of been more hands-off. I had had to lean on my parents and learned how to communicate a little bit more so on my own with the care team prior to being transitioned over. So when I did transition over, it was relatively smooth, but that's not to say that I don't think that there should be a significant increase in the mental health support that people receive whenever they're transitioning from peds to adults, just the overall community support. Being able to connect with other recipients your age is really, really important, especially for compliance and just feeling like you have a sense of community. And then also, like Selah said, you have questions whenever you transfer over. You'll have questions, I think, your entire life as a transplant recipient. So improving the education around pediatric care and then growing up and becoming an adult transplant recipient, so you know what you're getting yourself into a little bit more, and you know what questions to ask your care team and what to look out for. I think that's really, really important, again, to improve compliance, to improve the transition to care, and to overall improve our quality of life too.
Thank you, Maddie. You touched on so many important points as we think about transition, mental health, peer support, and there's a question in the chat about that exactly. You know, about wishing there was a group for an 18-year-old, you know, transitioning, and I'd love to hear, you know, from all of you if this is something TAP talked about or has a vision for in terms of the benefits you've all experienced through this community and how that could really be expanded upon to offer more peer supports and mental health supports for patients.
For me, oh, sorry, when I was transitioning, it took me honestly a long time to move from the peds to the adult team. I'm 22 and I've only had one meeting with my adult team. I just got transferred over. And for me, in that weird space of being in that in-between zone where you're too old to wait in the peds waiting room, but also you're not yet with the adult team, honestly, as for what TAP's planning for and advice I have, I don't know. I just finish navigating it myself. I do think that something like this for people in that zone would be quite helpful. Again, a place where you don't feel like the outlier, where you're not torn between two worlds of age, where you can talk with people in that zone with you and can reflect and feel accepted and seen. That would help a lot. But as for me, I don't have an answer. I only just got through it myself.
If it's okay, I can jump in. I think I have a love-hate relationship with support groups because, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but on one hand, the best thing about TAP is like everybody's coming with a common understanding of each other's experience, and it's actually provided the freedom to talk about other things like our careers, like our personal lives, and the common kind of denominator is not always like the, for lack of a better word, like the trauma of the transplant. And sometimes I think in support groups, the sense of community is really strong, but then it's kind of like, okay, well, what do you do with that? And I think like TAP has a really kind of unique perspective of you can have both those things, and then it's like, okay, well, what can you do with it? You have like all these different kind of resources and areas that you can go in, and especially with like research, education, and advocacy, like those are very like concrete kind of yeah, just like action steps to take once you kind of have that community. And when I joined TAP, I really thought we were going to be spending a lot of time like talking about our transplant recipient like experiences. And don't get me wrong, we definitely have, but we've also spent just as much time talking kind of about other aspects of our life. And it's much more of like a holistic kind of approach to what it's like being a transplant recipient. So while I do think like peer support groups are phenomenal, and I definitely wish I would have had one, I also think like a lot of times they're missing that component, and that's why it's really hard to get them going and keep them going, because once you have that group, it's kind of like, okay, well, now what do we do? And so I think like TAP is really unique in that kind of experience, and hopefully what we'll be able to do is kind of keep growing the program and have more and more folks come through each cohort.
Thank you all for sharing. I mean, I think one of the underlying messages that each of you are speaking to is that whether it's a need for a support group or a research study on how to improve transition or an article on adherence, how we really bring in diverse voices and experience across, all of your experiences to really inform how those things are developed and guided is really what has been the missing piece for so long. And now we have your expertise and energy and engagement to drive those things forward, which is so exciting. So thank you all.
I wonder if we could ask you guys, this is sort of towards another question in the Q&A. You have an audience of a lot of providers and a lot of parents and caregivers. Now that you guys are young adults and have been through, various years of your transplant journey and experiences and this transition to adult care, like, what do parents need to know? What could they do that's helpful? What do they maybe do that's not so helpful? What are your tips?
I'll go ahead and start us off here because I immediately after transplant, I had a wild experience. I was transplanted during COVID. So my immediate recovery was quite a unique experience there. For me, it was the medications. A few days after transplant, I had this liquid one that I had to drink after every meal. I was on a very high dose of prednisone, which meant my emotions were everywhere. I was constantly angry, upset. I went from not being able to eat much because of my issue I was having that caused the transplant to eating the entire house every 5 seconds. And that left me with so many changes that I don't think my parents were aware of would be the main focus after transplant. I was on pain medications for the surgery scars. It was the medications, the difficulty of taking them, and the effects of them that I think colored my post-transplant experience the most. And being aware of, okay, there's going to be a lot of medications, they're going to have a lot of effects. Everyone working together, parents and the patient, is going to be needed to navigate that because it's a lot.
One of the things I love about this group is that we often see somebody will share something and then everyone else goes, oh yeah, yeah, I know how that goes. And that sort of experience where you really have other folks who know exactly what you mean and have lived through that. I really enjoy seeing from you guys. Selah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was gonna say, from my experience, I think that the best thing that parents, providers, anyone in like the caregiver circle can do is just be there. There's a lot of things that I think are not really in your control to change if you're like the parent of a transplant recipient, but I think just like being there physically, emotionally, is very, very important. I also had a very unique transplant experience. My dad passed away 2 weeks before my transplant while I was living in the hospital. And so my doctors and my nurses literally just like physically being there. Like during the funeral, they came and like sat in and watched with me. They would like play board games with me. Like that is something that nobody could have changed, but just like physically being there would made like all the difference. And it's why I want to be a doctor. So I think just like physically being there, emotionally being there. If you're a parent and your kid just wants to like sit on the couch and watch a movie, like sit on the couch and watch the movie. So I think that is something that people overlook, and is definitely easier said than done, but I think it is something that makes a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, that's really powerful, Selah. And I also kind of want to take that one step further, is like being there and then listening. I think listening is feels pretty like simple and underrated, but I think that as a parent, my parents were probably so anxious and wanted me to know so much and wanted to tell me so much and help me so much. And I think would have really been helpful is just 5 minutes after a doctor's appointment or before a doctor's appointment or at the end of every day or after a hard week, like, Emma, like what's going on, and really like giving me the time and space and the agency to talk about what was going on. From my perspective, I think is really powerful. And I think parents can do that, and then clinicians have a lot of work to do that as well, as during clinic, really sitting there and maybe not talking for a couple minutes, but just saying like what's going on with you and how can we support you is going to drastically help patients want to be more take care of their transplant better when they feel like everybody's just as invested as they are.
I want to second Emma on that. Listening is a really big part of supporting a transplant patient, whether you're a provider or whether you're a parent. I always knew that my parents had my back. They listened very well. What I had was really rare, and there are a lot of questions, there are a lot of unknowns, and like Selah said, there are so many things that you just can't control in transplantation, but the things that we could control, my parents helped me control, and they, like I said, always had my back. So if we went into an appointment and I had questions, we made sure that the questions were answered. Medications that I didn't like, if I needed to have a special drink to drink them, we got a special drink to drink them. Just controlling what you can and making sure that you're really advocating for your kid if you're a caregiver, and advocating for your patient if you're a provider.
All I just had the opportunity to write a paper with Emma on adherence to transplant medications, which is often a hot topic as well, right? And what I think was so beautiful about what Emma wrote was that, you know, we all may have different reasons why we think adherence is important, right? You know, but that it's really important to truly understand what is the reason for the transplant recipient themselves, you know, in terms of what motivates you through the harder days or helps you with the things that are really challenging. And so that listening and really understanding your voice and perspective seems to ring true across all of these things. So thanks all for sharing.
Just taking a quick look for any other questions in the chat. Melissa, anything else you want to ask these guys, or guys, anything else you want to make sure you share to the audience?
I have one final question for you guys, and before we wrap up is, you know, I think that so many groups really want patient advocates and patient voices. Hospitals have, you know, patient family centered care committees, so many of these learning networks. And sometimes it can be challenging to get diverse voices and representative experiences as part of this group. What about TAP in particular, this effort in particular, has made this successful for you, has allowed you to engage? Is it the fact that you've really felt heard, that times catered to your schedule, that you were reimbursed for your time and for your expertise? Like, I'm curious, because I think there are a lot of patient family initiatives that truly don't move forward in engaging the patient and family voice. So I'd love to hear from you what works, given that this has.
I think one thing that I remember being very interesting is that when we were presented with TAP in like our first couple meetings, it was presented in a way that was very like, all right, here's what like our ideas we have, but like, what do you guys want this group to be? And I think that is something that has made us be so engaged because we are like making the group as we go, which I remember at first being like, do you guys know what you want this? Like, are we just but I think I now realize like the purpose of that, and that it's truly patient-centered. Like even the design of like making a patient-centered group was like, okay, what do the patients want the group to be? Which I think has been so interesting. And then, yeah, I think being very intentional about the diversity of the group also. So like making sure we have people who have been transplanted multiple times, people who have different organs, people who are different ages, people who are transplanted like across the lifespan. People of different racial groups and people of different cultures. Like I think being very intentional about the diversity, and then also literally letting us make the group has been very helpful in that.
I have to completely agree with everything that was just said. Being centered and being in this leadership role, getting a chance to create the group as we go, and the ideal of what we decide might be used as a format for other groups has been really exciting. But also, as said, the reimbursement is a part of it. But to the same level of the reimbursement, feeling respected in my time, in my effort, the reimbursement is a part of that, not even the main part of it. Just feeling very respected in this is nice. I heard about this group from my doctor team, and that also really helped encourage me to join. The combination of hearing about it from my doctors and being very respected is at least the success I found with this group.
Building off of the last two, I think the diversity is a really big part of why this group has been really successful. But I think it also allows for more flexibility and, like Andrew just said, a lot of respect. We're working with doctors, with surgeons, with caregivers, with each other. And there hasn't been a situation yet where I think a meeting has, derailed or gone wrong. I think we're all really respectful towards each other, and we really want to hear what we have to say. There are so many different experiences and perspectives, and we know that building off of each other is really how we're going to go forward. And like I said, the flexibility of it to be able to cover so many different topics in transplantation is really, really important. And I think that that's been a big part of the success of this group too.
I think to kind of bring it all together, like TAP still has definitely a lot of room to grow in our diversity and in the topics that we cover, and kind of learning who we are and growing with the organization. And I also think, something that has really become clear is at the surveys that we fill out after each meeting, our input is really kind of taken in, and then the next month something will be addressed that somebody will say like, oh, we got a lot of feedback about this, or somebody brought this up, or you'll write something in your survey and then in the meeting it'll be addressed, and I'm like, oh, okay, like my feedback, like Andrew was saying, is actually being taken into consideration. And I think a lot of times patient kind of centered care can be very performative, and so it's nice to know that our time is being respected and also taken into consideration, and it's not just the performance of it, but it's like the instillment of it, and really making sure that we feel like we have a say in what's going on is pretty cool.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. As the audience, I'm sure, can see, it is an extreme pleasure and honor to get to work with TAP, and we're really excited to work with others in the community. So let us know if there are places where you need TAP insight or consults, and we'll try to get you connected. We look forward to continuing to work together, and thank you to Transplant Families for your support in building this project, and for giving us that opportunity to share with you guys about it.
Thank you so much for having me.
This was an honor and a pleasure.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you guys for joining. It's really exciting to see how everybody is so excited about adolescent and young adult voice.